Up until about 2005, our family was largely vegetarian, not because my husband wanted that, but because I wrote the menus and did the cooking. And pasta, bread, we were on an extremely high carbohydrate diet. And then when my son was I was diagnosed with celiac disease in '05, and my son was diagnosed with Crohn's disease just a few months later. Meat was put back in the diet really, really fast because he was anemic. But I did what all celiacs do. I just went and bought the gluten-free version of everything. We still did gluten-free pasta. We still did gluten-free bread. I made gluten-free brownies. I mean, I just did what everybody does when they get that diagnosis. But we added meat back in because of Nathan's anemia.
Well,
And it wasn't.
and Penn was probably thrilled.
Oh yeah, the boys were really happy. One of the girls was less happy. But then it wasn't really until doing all the common stuff that so many women my age at that age do. Uh, I had fatigue. I had puffy ankles. I had put on 10 pounds that I didn't want and couldn't figure out where they came from because I didn't think I was eating any differently. And I was training for marathons. And I actually got so bad, I quit my job for a year. I just quit. I just couldn't keep up. I was raising 5 kids. I was coaching campfire clubs. I was running, but I just quit. I gave up. I mean, I didn't give up on the rest of life. And really it was my, I got to tell you, kudos to my sister. She is younger than I, and she found the South Beach diet in the early 2000s and said, hey, the food pyramid makes no sense. And I was like, yeah, right. I mean, I read Diet for a Small Planet. I read all those other books. I knew better than she did, of course. My sister's always right, by the way. And when I really, when I wasn't feeling great, I finally pulled out the South Beach Diet book, and I kind of poo-pooed it. But then, when Primal Blueprint sort of reinforced the impact of too much carbohydrate on your system and all the inflammation and all the insulin release, and all of a sudden I realized where the extra weight was coming from, and
some of that basic physiology was starting to,
yeah,
you're starting to remember that.
the physiology finally, maybe I was ready to hear it at that point, but it finally made sense. And that's in 2013. I told my husband we were going primal for Lent, and everything changed. The weight just kind of went away. The puffiness went away. I felt better. A year later, I had a hemoglobin A1C that was 5.7, which is just at the bottom of pre-diabetic. So I don't know where it was before I went primal.
You don't want to know, right?
I want to know. And It's come down since then, because that was like, I'm not going there. And just
now let me just qualify this. Now, a lot of people, they use hemoglobin A1C as a marker for diabetes, right? In the standard. But what HbA1c really is it's really a marker for glycation.
Right.
And the term is ages for advanced glycated end product, because it literally does age you.
But it's also an easy lab to get. So when you're just trying to do some screening for where am I, but I looked at that number and went, oh, no, this is not the way things are going to go for me. And then the other thing that happened, well, we stayed kind of primal paleo. The other thing that happened was I started having lifetime PRs in my races. 5K, 10K. In 2015, I had a PR in a half marathon. For those who are athletes, that's not supposed to happen in your late 50s and 60s. And for me, the proof was in the pudding. To me, that was just like an indicator that my fitness and my health was better than it had been a decade earlier when I had started running fairly seriously. And then I got some nice side effects. We talked about it earlier today. Lent overlaps the start of spring, and in the Sacramento Valley, spring is miserable for those of us with allergies. And my history was 2 antihistamines, eye drops, nose spray, 2 inhalers, prednisone for 3 or 4 weeks in May, every year since I moved up here to go to medical school. And I got into spring of 2013 and went, wait a minute, I've only started my nose drops and my eye spray or my nose spray and my eye drops so far. And that was all I used all season. And that's all I've used since. So I didn't expect that. That wasn't why I did it. But there's these little extra things that come along and you're like, wow.
Yeah.
I didn't know that was going to happen.
That was a big thing for me when I started my personal journey. I started this in 2000, and then in 2001 or 2, I really cut back on the concentrated carbs and the dairy because I was just miserable. And I'd read somewhere about that. And up until that point, the first couple of years, like I told you earlier today, I literally had to stop running because I would stop breathing. And I was just like,
bad.
It was miserable. And now I'm kind of like you. Yeah. In the springtime when the grass and tree pollen is pretty bad here in the Central Valley. Yeah, I feel it. I get a little bit of running eyes, a little itchy, but I'm not miserable. I'm not using meds. And I find that if I fast and really watch the carbs and keep my food intake to a minimum, it's kind of amazing how much I can attenuate that thing. And it goes back to what I talk about with inflammation. You have these layers of inflammation. So you have the food inflammation, you have maybe some inflammation from some exposure, or you have a little bit of inflammation if your periodontal health isn't on point, right? And then all of a sudden along comes the spring allergies, and that's the straw that breaks the camel's back, right? Whereas your immune system can to deal with it if it was just the one thing, but if your stomach and gut isn't right, or you've got inflammation from too much carbs or crappy food, or you're taking in the wrong kind of oils, or you get exposed to something else that causes an inflammatory response. It's the allergies are what set you over the top. But it was just kind of interesting how when you take those, like what I call those layers of inflammation back, your body actually can work pretty darn well.
Yep.
Yep.
So and that, then, the marathon was the icing on the cake last month. That was pretty fun.